What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and patch 12.12 came out a little while ago, but this is going to be taking a break from results patches. So let's talk about what actually changed in 12.2. All the big changes basically you can see right here on your screen, right over there. And let's actually measure what happened. Now, of course, in this case, we are measuring all ranked games that happened and over the last 10 or so days, which means we actually have an incredibly large sample of data. Keep in mind, way more players play ranked at the start of the season than they do maybe later on. Maybe towards the end of the season they pick back up, but we're almost never going to have this embarrassment of wealth of games for the rest of the year, unless the game gets even more popular than it already is, which, of course, League is quite popular. But we've got a lot of data. So once again, this is all ranks over the course of patch 12.2, comparing the champion to 12.1 to see what changed in the patch. First things first, there were big buffs to Nocturne. And it seems like over the 700,000 games that he played, gained about 3% win rate, which seems, pretty sizable for the fact that you got an AD ratio buff on Q and a bunch of health growth, and that's obviously pretty meaningful and whatnot. Because we are measuring all ranks, we are not getting weird biases due to elo inflation and stuff. So this is just across all solo queue games over 12.2 compared to 12.1. And because we have so many games, we are really confident that indeed Nocturne is maybe a 51.5% win rate champion, and the buffs were to the tune of just above 3%. That said, there were behavioral changes. So Stridebreaker's pick rate went from 16 to 22%, and Duskblade's pick rate went from 36 to 33%. People are getting off lethality builds onto Bruiser builds, which, as we can see here, are about 2% better. Bruiser Nocturne is about 2% higher win rate than lethality, despite the fact that you would assume behavioral sort of modifications in that, oh, I'm doing well, I'll just go lethality Nocturne. Oh, I'm not doing too well, I'll buy a Kindle gem. So even if you think that still exists, you still have more than a 2% win rate strength buff by going Bruiser instead of lethality. Both builds had a reasonably large number of games. We still have a pretty strong amount of confidence in how strong these are. We noted the fact that, okay, well, lethality Nocturne is still quite good, and Bruiser Nocturne is not so incredibly absurd. Which is kind of interesting to see here, that the win rate didn't jump up so absurdly much, but obviously, did gain a fair bit, gained about 3%, and lands at about 53%. So Bruiser Nocturne was balanced. Bruiser Nocturne is now quite strong, but, not really absurd. So that's there. All right, next up, we had changes to Sena. And Sena as a bot laner is sitting at 53.6% win rate, which seems very high, reasonably popular, 300,000 games. And there's enough games that we're like, yeah, we are really confident this was like a 4% win rate buff to Sena. However, there were behavioral changes. Kraken Slayer's pick rate went from 70% to 36% of her games, and Eclipse went from 13 to 54% of her games. Now, I have never seen such gigantic shifts in player behavior for any patch ever. This is actually really absurd for something that didn't directly change anything. In terms of like her build math, right? Because if you're going Kraken Slayer versus Eclipse versus whatever, I mean, I guess you want to buy Rageblade less often because, it has an AD ratio on the slow. But the fact that we saw such absurd movements is actually pretty incredible. Now, it's worth noting that Kraken Slayer, in fact, gained less win rate, I assume because he's going for items like Rapid Fire Cannon or Rageblade, aka things without bonus AD on them. And so she was not only behaviorally pushed towards building bonus AD items, which is pretty relevant, but, they are in fact far more rewarding. So unfortunately, the change that came through is one that actually further exacerbated the difference between Kraken Slayer builds and lethality or Divine Sunderer builds. To my understanding, this is antithetical to August's goals with further updates onto Sena. That, anytime I am asked, and anytime I have an audience to tell, I'll be like, hey, by the way, Kraken Slayer builds are really bad. Her other builds are far better. Closing the gap is useful. I know, for example, there was a change list that got pulled, but was a possibility for the changes in 12.2, where her bonus crit to lifesteal conversion was going to get more generous, aka overcapping on crit, was going to help. It was going to, be stronger, aka Kraken Stunna builds were going to be a bit stronger. That got pulled. He kept the slow. Unfortunately, it actually further exacerbated the difference because, again, bonus AD is on Eclipse builds and is not on all the Kraken Slayer builds. Now, that said, and I didn't measure this because it wasn't terribly relevant because it's not a popular build of hers, going for builds such as Redemption plus Iceborne Gauntlet, or I guess Frostfire Gauntlet is the name it is now. Those didn't get anything from the bonus AD stuff. So, Frostfire Gauntlet Sena gained, absolutely nothing from the AD ratio on the slow. And even the slow on the Q itself is not very meaningful because you already have a slow on the auto attack via Frostfire Gauntlet. So I assume that build gained less win rate. And I think it is correct also, simultaneously, to also, nerf the full tank builds, because even better than her Eclipse and Sunderer builds, Sena's full tank builds were even better in 12.1. Again, didn't measure it here, but worth noting that we've got a lot of moving things here, right? Where the only things we've got left are like, well, you can give her crit ratios and attack speed ratios. Maybe that's okay. So again, there's difficulty here, but I want to kind of bring up what's been going on here is that there are also behavioral changes. But again, yeah, we're actually really, really confident that Eclipse builds gained more win rate than Kraken Slayer builds did, at least for AD carry Sena, right? So worth pointing out here. Now, next up is Sena Support. Sena Support gained another solid 3% win rate. As we can see here, we're really confident in this one, 1.3 million games, and she's sitting at a pretty reasonable spot overall. But if we dive into it, we see that Kraken Slayer is still her most popular build at 37%. Divine Slenderer gained some pick rate at 24%, but once again, we can kind of see what's going on here, which is also a couple of interesting things. So first things first, reasonably balanced as a Kraken Slayer support, quite strong as a Divine Slenderer support, so I keep that in mind. It's a very good build here. But worth noting that we are quite confident that this time around, Kraken Slayer actually gained more than Divine Slenderer, which is a little quizzical and a little strange, but there's an argument I can make for why this is, which is that support Sena gains a lot more souls than AD carry Sena. So if AD carry Sena is going Kraken Slayer, Rapid Fire Cannon, Rage Blade, right? She's got 1 attack damage item and has 40 souls by the end of the game. If she's playing support Sena, she's going to have 100 souls by the end of the game. And at that point, she's got plenty of AD and doesn't need the AD conversion quite so much. And at that point, attack speed is actually going to be more valuable because getting more attacks off lets you refresh your Q sooner to get more Q slows. So there is still a kit hook to go the other way with this one, although it might seem unintuitive at first. Keep in mind that support Sena gains way, way, way more souls. But again, just kind of pointing out that even though we can kind of do, I guess, this right here, this whole data table here is worth noting that, realistically, Kraken Slayer Sena gained more for support because support gets more AD, but Divine Slenderer, right, the gap was closed slightly for support Sena, which is a positive there as well. So interesting to look at, kind of neat to see what's going on there, but worth noting what happened here with this one. Next up is Samira. Samira gained basically 50 flat damage, 50 flat damage, I believe, on her ultimate. It gained her about 0.5% win rate. Again, Samira is actually quite popular, so turns out we can be really, really confident this was exactly a 0.5% win rate buff, or very, very, very close to one. Unfortunately, she's still not in too good of a spot. She's not terribly strong, so hey, worth noting, she isn't doing all that well. Could do with further buffs. That said, she's still quite popular, right? People are clearly happy to play Samira, so not a huge problem. Doesn't absolutely need buffs, just is technically weak, which means I'm generally not going to play her very much unless the comp exactly fits her. Next up, we had Veigar. Veigar ended up gaining very similar amounts of win rate in both roles. They're within each other's confidence intervals, so about 2% and change. But Veigar mid and Veigar bot are both incredibly, incredibly powerful. They are really, really, really strong. This is a champion absolutely worth including in your champion pools. He is very, very powerful and absolutely worth playing. And yeah, is good, should play the champ. Sounds great to do. Next up is Volabair. Volabair, both top and jungle, gains similar amounts of power. Worth noting that an E cooldown and bonus AD scaling landed us in pretty much the exact same boat as far as actual power gained. So top and jungle apparently use both in similar ways. Which I just thought was kind of interesting, but gained a solid 2% win rate. Volabair top clearly needed it. He's now resting in a totally reasonable spot. Volabair jungle wasn't really in that bad of a spot, is now definitely in the strong side. Not as strong as, say, bot lane Sena or Veigar overall, but Volabair jungle is a strong jungler and really, really worth considering. I want to give a lot of credit to the designers for how they did the Tristana changes. They, in fact, managed to find a set of changes that buffed bot lane more than mid lane and got her bot lane win rate above her mid lane win rate. She's not incredibly popular in either case. It's worth noting that actually Tristana mid's overall pick rate is actually lower than Veigar bot's overall pick rate. You can see about half as many games in that champion. But yeah, worth noting that Tristana is back into a, fairly healthy spot. Gained somewhere to the tune of about 1.5% win rate. Seems to have gained more for bot lane than for mid lane. Obviously, mid lane a bit more volatile with fewer games, but we're really confident this was like a 1.8% win rate bump to bot lane. And, within reason, it's 1.8. It could have been more, I suppose, for mid lane, but, probably not based on the fact that level 1 stats should probably be affecting bot lane a bit more since bot laners get fewer stats. But again, I really want to say, hey, well done to Riot. I saw naysayers, I saw doomers saying, oh my god, they're overbuffing mid Trist. It's going to be so OP bullshit. She already tries to one-shot you by jumping in on you level 3. 50.5% win rate. Just saying, Next up, we have the the Wind Brothers, Yona and Yasuo, both very, very popular. Obviously, 1.6, 1.3 million games is a lot. And they gained a solid 0.8% win rate off of a Q-AD ratio bump. They are both balanced champions. It's worth noting that by whatever metrics that I can see, Yasuo and Yone are among the most mained champions in League of Legends. Yasuo players have more mastery on their champion than you probably do on your champion. So anytime you are against them in a matchup, they've got more experience than you in the matchup, which, you know, worth noting, right? That these champions are very, very popular, and you know, that's a meaningful distinction to talk about here. Alrighty. Either way, yeah, they are relatively balanced champions, and we can kind of move on from there. We're going to scroll down to the bottom of this one, and we've got Kench Support. Kench Support gained a lot of power, 1.6% win rate with these changes. Of course, not terribly really popular. Kench Support, it tends to have a pretty normal sort of variety of champions he's alongside. No really incredible synergies going on here. So no common synergies going on here. So nothing really to speak about here with Kench. Worth noting though that though it's not in the data here, Kench as a bot laner also got buffed for, you know, the same reasons. However, Kench bot is hard bound to playing with Sena support. So it's just people playing Sena Kench. So that's not really an indication of Kench bot lane's overall power level. It's going to be kind of hard to know for now. But possibly Kench bot lane as a bruiser bot laner might be viable. Janna has been micropatched a couple of times. There were a couple of glacial augment bugs. Both at this point now have been micropatched. One where you had kind of infinite duration glacial slows off of, I think, her Q, and then one where her R was counting as far too long of a duration for how long it then put people, how long it put down ice trails for. So there are some Janna nerfs that aren't really tracked in this. So in a similar vein, if we do like a 12.3 results patch, we'll see a sort of softer nerf, or like a further nerf in 12.3, because it's now all the data is catching up with the micro patch. But clearly Janna doing quite well post patch. Yes, W is a worse poke skill, but very clearly Janna's doing very, very well. The fact that she gets a bunch of heal and shield power is really valuable, since heal and shield power affects the glacial slow, and that's pretty meaningful. So yeah, Janna's in a really good spot. We are really confident she performed 3% better this patch than previous. So good job on the changes. I think Janna is a much more exciting and interesting champion, and that's cool to see. The final thing we had happen were lethal tempo changes. So lethal tempo became more of a scaling rune, arguably slightly more buffed for range than for melee. But we can see here the differences before and after for Caitlyn and Irelia, who with you know, Yone and Yasuo, this is kind of tough to measure because they got direct changes and lethal tempo changes. So it's almost impossible to separate those two things. But we can measure Caitlyn and Irelia, and we have a pretty reasonable amount of confidence that this is going to be fairly accurate. So Caitlyn gained about 0.2% win rate off lethal tempo. Worth noting that, it's obviously not a very large win rate gain, but considering that she has 1.4 million games, we're really confident it was actually buffed. Caitlyn lethal tempo is actually doing better post-patch than before. Even though the pick rate went from 62 to 54% on the Keystone, it seems to be more performant, so maybe players should go back. In the Irelia case, it actually fell off a cliff really hard from 28 to 43% pick rate. Worth noting that Irelia is at a weird spot where her Conqueror win rate went up as well. Not quite as much as lethal tempo win rate went up, but I think it went up by 0.6%. So I'm not sure what happened, but Irelia gained both lethal tempo and Conqueror win rate patch over patch. Could be that she's good into champions who became more popular. Could be a couple things went on there, but end of the day, what happened? I mean, this seems to be a pretty good choice here, so it's really worth considering that Irelia should go back to lethal tempo, and Caitlyn's, though Fleet Foot was already better on her, the gap has been closed somewhat with lethal tempo. Next up, we have a set of nerfs. Champions getting a little bit weaker. So Lulu lost about 0.4% win rate. 1.9 billion games. She is exceedingly popular. 1.9 million is absurdly large. There are more Lulu support games than Yasuo mid games. Lulu is just absurdly popular, right? Like that is a ridiculous number of games. Very, very, very popular champion. Of course, some of this is going to be the fact that high ban rates prevent you from being able to pick a champion. It might be that Yasuo's unbanned pick rate is higher than Lulu's unbanned pick rate, but worth just noting, hey, that's going on here. We can delete these because I don't believe those are useful bits of data. Alrighty. So what do we have going on here? Well, we have Lulu. So, yep, she lost about 4.4% win rate, which is what you get about a 1% nerf to her W. She's not incredibly strong in in all elos combined, which centers around silver and gold. But you know, that's fine. Next up is Shen. Shen actually lost quite a bit of power, right? 1.2% off of this. Still an overall strong champion. Across all elos, just a bit less so. Good job there. Talon Jungle was always more of a problem in really, really high elos, but across average players, again, lost a lot of power, isn't doing too well, really not a big concern. Worth noting that Talon Mid actually gained some win rate, which I find kind of interesting. Still actually fewer games than Talon Jungle on this patch, if I recall correctly, but somehow gained 0.4% win rate despite the fact that there were no direct changes to Talon Mid. In fact, he lost power since his W doesn't kill monsters as fast, so if you ever wanted to poach a camp, it got worse, but you know, maybe the landscape changed around him. Who knows? Kiana Jungle lost a little bit of power. Kiana Mid lost even less. Very, very, very small changes, it turns out, that base health regen didn't change much about the champion, and so really didn't have much going on here. Zed lost some base damage on the ultimate, which lost him about 1% win rate, and Tom Kench top got a big old suite of changes that dropped him about 2%. Be right back 1 second. All right, want to step back in and mention that I had actually screwed up slightly. I was taking the wrong data table. This was the number of games pre-patch. So if we Control Z, Control Y, we get our different data. So unsurprisingly, of course, you know, we are fewer games into the patch. We're also, right, no longer start of season, so we're always going to get fewer games, but worth noting that the confidence intervals change a little bit here. Still to the fact that we are pretty confident that Talon Mid gained win rate patch over patch, which I just find kind of interesting. But yeah, 485,000 games of Tom Kench top. He's actually still a rather popular top laner. Which is like kind of impressive that a champion like Tom Kench actually has more games than almost all of Kiana combined. Really comparable to Talon overall as a champion, really comparable to Shen overall as a champion. Like Tom Kench really picked up a lot of pick rate. People actually started playing him a lot, and he's actually fine, right? Post-patch he was nerfed, and he's like a reasonable champion, which is like, hey, kudos to the designer, right? To close the gap a fair bit. Tom Kench is really, really close to 50% win rate, and Tom Kench Support's not even in that bad of a spot either, where he's at, I mean, 48's not great, to be clear, but like that's pretty impressive. Like that's a pretty good gap close. So I just want to say kind of well done there. Overall, again, Zed lost about 1% win rate. He is, you know, on the slightly weak side for average play. If you want to ban him because you don't like him, fair enough. But there's the patch. Hopefully it was enjoyable. I thought it was kind of interesting to look at the results. Something surprised me. But, you know, cool to see things like behavioral change on Sena because it was like a really, really large, really meaningful here. But that's actually part of the win rate change, of course. So anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time. Bye-bye.